Vice President, before we talk about Brexit, I want to ask you about China. There's a lot of speculation today that the European Union and China are going to sign a new trade arrangement before the end of the year. Is that going to be the case? Are you going to sign a new trade arrangement?
Well, we are working very intensively with China on comprehensive agreement on investment. And indeed, work is in very advanced stages. We had a very productive last round of negotiations. I would say we are not quite there yet, but it's definitely feasible that if things move forward as they are moving now, that we can conclude still this year.
Okay, so if you can get it done in the next 2 weeks after you sign it, is that going to guarantee that you have more market access in China? Is that what the content is about?
Yes, this is first and foremost, of course, agreement about investment, but that's the idea. So what we are concentrating is level playing field issues. So, for example, disciplines on state-owned enterprises, questions on forced technology transfers, transparency of subsidies, and also it's about market access. So how European companies can better access China's market. Of course, there are also market access offerings from our side, but the idea is in the case that we need to rebalance the economic and investment relationship with China, because currently Europe is substantially more open to Chinese investments than China is to EU's investment.
Okay, and that could happen in the next 2 weeks. And let's also talk about the U.S., just to put this aside. There's still pending litigation, especially when it comes to the lobster case. Do you foresee a situation where you lift completely all the tariffs that are happening around?
If we discuss specifically a so-called lobster deal, I would say everything is on track. So we expect lobster deal entering into force. So this is indeed a tariff agreement on targeted tariff reductions. So I'm glad we managed to bring this lobster deal to the successful conclusion. Of course, there are a number of things where we need to deal with US bilaterally concerning the tariffs and addressing certain problems. I would mention, for example, steel and aluminum tariffs, Airbus-Boeing dispute, and definitely we'll need to see how we cooperate in the international stage in the context of WTO reform, in a context of a multilateral rules-based cooperation.
And are you relieved that Joe Biden is going to enter the White House and start the new year? I know you talk about a new relationship.
Indeed, the European Commission has published a communication on, so to say, fresh start of transatlantic relationship, and there is important part on trade. And the first signals which President-elect Biden is sending in terms of his commitment to multilateralism, his commitment to improve relations with the EU are very encouraging. So we're willing to build on that basis.
Okay, and now let's talk about Brexit. How confident are you that we get to see a deal before the end of the year?
Well, as you know, we are now in indeed last-minute negotiations. So there is progress, for example, as regards one of the key questions of level playing field. There are still important gaps which need to be fulfilled, but I would say technically pretty much all the things are worked through. So now it's more of a question whether there is a political will for this last-minute push to address really difficult questions and to make compromises.
Okay, what about the ratification? The European Parliament says if they don't get a text by Sunday, they're not going to vote on it this month. And that means that potentially we head into a situation where the leaders agree to a deal that's not ratified. That's very problematic.
That's indeed very problematic. That's why it's important that we engage very closely with European Parliament, because we must admit that the time for parliamentary scrutiny of the deal is already extremely compressed. And European Parliament has already agreed to come for extraordinary session between Christmas and New Year, if this would be needed for Brexit deal ratification. So, of course, we need to engage closely with European Parliament to see when really is the last moment we can submit the text of the agreement so that it can be ratified still this year and enter into force as of January 1st next year.
Okay, just very briefly, as a final question, what happens if there is a deal on the leaders level, but it's not ratified? Do you foresee that perhaps for 1 or 2 weeks you are going to trade on WTO terms?
That of course would be a very unfortunate situation if there is a deal and it's not ratified. So I think rather we now engage with European Parliament and find a way when we really need to finalize negotiations so that it can be still ratified. And I would say it's not that now there are big technical questions which require lots of time to address, lots of technical works preparation. It's all done. Now it's really about political decisions and addressing some of the difficult points in the negotiations to get it over the line.